Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is my Forbes colleague, staff writer Zach Everson. Zach, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me on, Brittany. Excited to chat about the debate.
I think the debate is a very good place to start. First question is, what happened? Many people, both sides of the aisle, have been calling President Biden's performance disastrous. Tell us about it.
Yeah, the whole thing was awful. It was an awful debate. I mean, Donald Trump showed up and acted like Donald Trump and lied and changed the subject and did all the Donald Trump sort of things that you'd expect him to do, which is not exactly what you're looking for in a presidential candidate. But none of that was new. What was new, the big question was, how would Joe Biden handle a debate? Now, remember, he did not have any primary debates. He went through relatively uncontested. There were some other candidates there. They did want to debate him. The Biden campaign said no. In hindsight, maybe it would have helped. It might have level set expectations, because what we witnessed last night has been called, devastating. That very well may be the case. Time will tell. But, what we saw last night was a man in his 80s staying up at 9 p.m. trying to have consistent conversations for 90 minutes. And he fell way short of what most Americans would want their president to be like.
I was talking to a Democratic strategist earlier today, and she said it wasn't even so much Donald Trump won this debate. It was that Joe Biden lost, and he lost pretty badly. He continuously trailed off. He lost his train of thought pretty frequently. He didn't fill in those gaps where the moderators a few times said, Mr. President, you have this many seconds left. Do you want to add anything? There have been a lot of calls today and last night for President Biden to step down. So first, could Biden be replaced as the nominee?
Yes, that could certainly happen. I mean, you're right. His responses last night were trailed off, gibberish, and reminded me a lot of the video of I think it was Miss South Carolina that went viral probably 15 years ago with an answer. And she did not move on to the next round of the beauty pageant. So yeah, the Democrats have some options. The best options for them would be if President Biden were to say, "I'm not running." That does not seem likely to happen, though. I just spent a fair amount of time reporting on Biden when doing his net wealth, reading his biography, and that's not the story he tells himself. He views himself as somebody who's come back time and time again, and that's true to a certain extent. But he's also in his 80s now, and he's not going to get less old. Like that's going to continue to happen. There's not really a way to bounce back from this. So yeah, they could try to push him out. A few gently coaxing him out the door. And there's also something they could do at the convention, whereas these delegates do have, I think they have to vote in good conscience to support the person who won the primary. That maybe their conscience says, let's go with somebody else.
As you said, President Biden does really consider himself the comeback kid. And this story played out, I mean, not the debate, but the story of being the comeback kid played out in the 2020 election, where everyone said during the primary, it's not President Biden's time. At one point, at that point, he was vice president. But he came in fifth in, I believe, Iowa. And then when it was the South Carolina's primary, things turned around for him. But he did sweep this primary season. He does have enough delegates to be voted as the official nominee in August at the DNC. So would he have to leave voluntarily?
No, I mean, these delegates could go ahead and move without him. But, he's been the head of the party for such a long time. He got to pick a lot of these delegates. They are Biden loyalists. I don't see enough just immediately jumping ship to give anybody else a majority on this. I think you need to see some coordination, some jockeying before the convention to figure out who would be the right person to fill his spot. In 4 years, it's a long time, especially when you're dealing with somebody of that age. We all know people in their 70s and 80s, loved ones, relatives, friends, and there can be a big difference in 4 years. I mean, heck, there could be a big difference in 6 months there as people age when they're seniors. And it's the Joe Biden of 2020 is not what we're getting now, and that was painfully clear last night.
And it was painfully clear last night that the Joe Biden we got last night wasn't even the Joe Biden at the State of the Union, who did seem more energetic, who did seem like he had more vigor in him, who wasn't incoherent at all there. But what would happen to his campaign money? Would he be able to transfer that? What would that look like? Let's say Democrats choose the path of replacing Biden.
The options there are pretty limited. He could the money would basically, I mean, he could just sit on it and say, I'm not giving it to anybody. First thing you would have to do, though, would be to pay off any debts, any vendors, and then he could transfer it all to the party. And this is obviously an option should Donald Trump drop out as well, that they can transfer the money to the party, and then the party could do what it wants with the money. So kind of taking us back to old school, back rooms, party bosses, cigars, and all that kind of stuff. And I think there'd also be a price to pay for this as well, because primary voters spoke. Did they have all the information that we do now about Joe Biden? No. But when you're going ahead, and I think part of the big push the Democrats have is that they are the party that is fighting to preserve democracy, and that message is really going to be weakened if they then say, oh yeah, that guy who our voters just elected in the primaries, never mind him, we're going to nominate somebody else. But the party itself could get the money.
Democrats I talked to last night and this morning feel a bit gaslit today after watching that debate, because Democratic lawmakers for the past year have been saying, no, President Biden behind closed doors, he is sharp, he is with it. All those videos you see are a lie. The Wall Street Journal had a piece a few weeks ago saying behind closed doors, President Biden is slipping. And Democrats came on the record after that and said, no, that is not true. That's a lie. But then the American people last night saw him at that debate, and it was a different story. So who would be the Democrats that are being floated that would replace Biden?
Oh, gosh. Many of them. And Gavin Newsom is obviously the name that comes to the forefront. He's certainly positioned himself in that way. He has a political action committee that's already out there. He's been running around the country trying to make a big name for himself. So he's certainly the one that comes to mind. Obviously, California, not a purple state, very Democratic. The other names typically come from swing states where they're people who've shown that they can win in a purple state. So you've got Raphael Warnock, the senator from Georgia, who won, I think it was two statewide campaigns in 2 or 3 years, because he came in to fill part of a term and then got reelected. So he certainly showed it. Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan is another name that's coming to the top of people's list as well.
What about Vice President Kamala Harris? Because Biden has a low approval rating. She, in some polls, has an even lower approval rating. Is she a choice that people are floating?
Well, I mean, she's the vice president. So, yes, people are going to mention her. There's some speculation that maybe Biden would have stepped aside after one term, and that was his intent. He did talk about being a transitional president years ago, but decided against it because he realized Harris was not up to the job. She's certainly taken a lot of negative press. Putting her in charge of the border is not a situation that's going to set her up for success. So she's still there. She is a logical choice to run, but I don't know. I just don't see her having much of a chance at all. I don't see a lot of Democrats really coalescing around her.
I saw an interesting post today on Twitter that said, Bill Clinton was elected over 30 years ago in 1992. And as of today, he's younger than both Donald Trump and President Biden. And I'm thinking about his wife, Hillary Clinton, who ran for president in 2016. Is she a possibility?
The Trump campaign would love that. I mean, there is nothing like putting up somebody who he already beat out there. No, you would not. I mean, is she a possibility? Maybe. Would that be a good decision for anybody? Only for Donald Trump. I mean, she ran a terrible campaign when she had a full apparatus in place. Now to come in and do this without any apparatus, with really, being a civilian for the last 6-7 years, I think it would be a horrible choice for Democrats to go in that direction. And there's nothing. When you're saying, oh, these candidates are too old, they're too old, coming back with somebody about that same age is not really a good play.
And when people aren't that enthusiastic about a 2020 sequel, I don't know how enthusiastic they would be about a 2016 one, but I am curious about what you're thinking about next, because obviously there aren't poll numbers that are coming in yet after the debate, but we're less than 24 hours out, and while we have seen op-ed after op-ed begging President Biden to drop out, pundits on all networks saying, President Biden, you should step aside, Democrats are coalescing around him. President Biden himself indicated he's sticking in the race. He said, let's keep going. He also did admit he's not as good of a debater as he has been in the past. President Obama today posted on social media saying he essentially chalked it up to a bad debate night. Congressman Jim Clyburn said he's going to tell Biden to, quote, stay the course. So what are you looking out for next?
Money. They did claim that they had a pretty decent haul after the debate. Now, whether that was, it might have just been sympathy. People might have just thought it was one of those charity commercials on there, like, with the dogs in cages, and been like, oh man, we got to give this guy some money and help him out. Or whether it was because they were now more excited than ever about Joe Biden's candidacy. I don't know. But it's not just the money for him. It's the money for the down ballot races, too. There's a lot of talk that he could be a drag on Democrats' chances in the House and in the Senate. And, you're looking at a possibility of him basically doing to the executive and the legislative branches what Ruth Bader Ginsburg did to the judiciary, where somebody, who's an elder person in their party, highly revered, doesn't exactly know when to leave the stage. And it ends up costing their party, in the long run, it ends up costing the values that they fought their entire career for, because they didn't know when to say goodbye. They ended up able to get replaced by a Republican. And I think that's something that Biden is certainly at risk of doing, and, giving Republicans control of all three branches.
You mentioned Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I'm thinking of Dianne Feinstein, who did not leave when others called on her. I'm thinking of President Biden. Do you think Democrats could potentially have a legacy problem here when you look at that type of behavior?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Their rules for how they handle their seniority in Congress are different than Republicans, and then it's largely based on seniority. And you're not forced off the leadership of these committees after a few years. So you have these people who stick around forever, and they're not ushered off the stage, and they don't know exactly when to leave. And that's just a huge problem. Feinstein wasn't as big a deal because the Democrats were going to be able to replace her with another Democrat. There was some strategy to that they didn't want to have to spend money defending her seat. If it was open, it would cost a little bit more. This way they'd have more money. But that was also somewhat short-sighted. At some point you're going to have to fight for, Dianne Feinstein wasn't going to stay there forever. At some point that seat was going to open up and you're going to have to deal with that. So yeah, I do think the Democrats have a problem with that. And that goes back to Obama, actually. I think Obama really didn't develop that deep of a bench. He was widely viewed as having his own apparatus outside of the Democratic Party that got him elected and did a wonderful job getting him elected. But then when he was gone, the Democratic Party didn't have that infrastructure to follow him up. Hillary was viewed as the heir apparent. That didn't turn out well for them. And there really wasn't anybody younger who was ready to come in behind him. And we got Donald Trump. And we very well may get Donald Trump again.
Well, Zach Everson, per usual, thank you for the conversation.
My pleasure, Brittany. Have a good weekend.